good writing is really essential if you want to build your reputation as a thought leader. I've worked with so many thought leaders over the years, the ones who have broken through the noise and the clutter out there, and there's a lot of noise and clutter out there, have almost invariably been good writers.
My discussion is with Glenn Leibowitz, who for the last 25 years has been working at McKinsey and Company's Greater China Consulting Group as head of communications. Glenn has helped numerous McKinsey partners get recognized for their expertise in the form of McKinsey quarterly articles, op-eds in leading business publications, books, and research reports. He's also helped several McKinsey partners gain big followings on LinkedIn. In our interview, you're going to learn 4 things: why you should encourage your organization's thought leaders and those who aspire to be thought leaders to become better writers themselves, rather than just relying on people like us to write it for them. Second, why thought leaders need to fully trust people like us to help them convey their ideas, and how to build that trust. Third, why LinkedIn has become such an important platform for thought leaders and what they need to do to attract the audience that they want. And lastly, how Glenn sees generative artificial intelligence technologies such as ChatGPT changing the playing field for thought leaders and thought leadership professionals. Hello, Glenn. It is great to have you on our show, having been on your show about, I think it was aired about a month ago. I think that's right. Right?
That's right, Bob. That's right, Bob. No, thanks so much for inviting me on your show. It's a real privilege and honor to speak with you about a topic that is near and dear to me, and I know is to you. And it's really, I know you're a legend in the industry, so it's really quite an honor to be here with you today.
Well, thank you. And I've been following you for such a long time. I love what you write about writing. And I want to get into a bunch of issues about thought leadership, but particularly, writing and the importance of writing and how people can write better and what happens when you write better. What's the impact of all that? So why don't we begin with kind of the beginning of this, which in my mind is, why can good writing help somebody who aspires to be a thought leader or is a recognized thought leader? Why is good writing so elemental, so important to people who want to be famous for their expertise?
Right. Well, I've been doing this for a long time, like you have, Bob. For me, it's been over 23 years, and what I would say is that good writing is really essential if you want to build your reputation as a thought leader. Now, why do I say that? Your writing is a reflection of your thinking. And so if you're building your reputation and your business on the back of the strength of your thinking, of your ideas, and if your writing is the most obvious reflection of that, then it seems pretty clear to me that you need to invest in making sure your writing is good. I've worked with so many thought leaders over the years, and the ones who have broken through the noise and the clutter out there, and there's a lot of noise and clutter out there, have almost invariably been good writers. And they've been good writers even before working with editors like myself or like you, for example. And the best ones, frankly, are the ones who sit down and write the first draft themselves. That's where their true voice comes from. Yes, they could rely on ghostwriters or idea developers, which is a term that I think you prefer to use. And I like that too, by the way, idea developers. They certainly have the resources to do so, as you know. Resources is generally not a limitation for them, which is a good thing, right? But they realize that they have far more impact when they actually sit down and write. And now some of them dictate and have their thoughts transcribed and then edited, and that works perfectly well. And I work with thought leaders who use that approach, and I help them do that. That's fine. But the best thought leaders have something about the way they communicate verbally that translates into the way they communicate in writing. It's different, obviously, but the two are definitely linked, and you can sense that when you read something. So if as a thought leader, you really don't have this time to sit down and write, that's fine. There are capable writers and editors, idea developers out there who can help you, and you should definitely leverage their expertise. But whatever you do, my suggestion is just don't hand over 100% of your writing to someone else. Even if it's a matter of going in and editing or commenting on the draft that was written by someone else, you'll want to make sure that you inject the experience and insights that only you possess. And you want to put some of your personality into your writing as well.
So, Glenn, if let's say an aspiring thought leader, someone who is really motivated to, to get his or her ideas out there in the world through writing and public speaking and et cetera, being interviewed by the press, came to you and said, Glenn, here's my topic. My expertise is this, this, and that. How do you advise us to proceed? With the choices, of course, being, Glenn, I can just talk to you and you could ghostwrite for me, or I, the aspiring thought leader, I can take a first draft, a stab at a first draft, and then you can help me raise it to a higher level. What do you advise an aspiring thought leader to do in the process of codifying their ideas? Would you rather they write the first draft, or would you rather them talk to you and you write the first draft and they respond to it?
Right. No, I've of course worked with thought leaders who have different preferences and different capabilities, and I've it's run the whole gamut. So my what I do is I just ask them what they feel most comfortable with, because I want to what I know, I'm confident that they have ideas that are trapped in their heads that need to get out. And I'm just on a mission, on a hunt to try to get that out of their heads and on paper. And so if it's a I've worked with thought leaders who have, I'll schedule a call with them, and it could be 15 minutes, and I can get a whole, let's say, LinkedIn blog post out of them in 15 minutes where they talk, they dictate, and I'll transcribe or have it transcribed and then edit it. That works well for some people. That same thought leader that I'm referring to, actually, he also has, been on a flight, jotted down a couple of ideas, and sent me that draft that I edited, and that worked very, very well for him. I've worked with those. So I do recommend thought leaders try to sit down and jot down at least an outline. We call it a dot dash outline, whatever you want to call it. Just get the ideas down on paper. Does not have to be completely formed or finished or polished, but just get something down on paper. That works for a lot of thought leaders. And I just worked with someone this week. He gave me his outline, and I did some additional research, some reading, some thinking, some writing, throwing things away, coming back to it. So that's something that I'm in the process of working with him on that piece. But he jotted down the ideas, and he said, "Look, let's make this an iterative process," which is exactly what it should be. He threw me his ideas. I threw him a rough first draft today, for example, and I'm waiting to hear back from him tomorrow. He's going to bring some other people in to take a look at it. Then there are those who actually give me a completely well-formed, well-written draft that only needs copy editing. And I love that. Obviously, for obvious reasons. And I've worked with thought leaders who've done that over the years. And, it just literally takes me, 10, 15 minutes to go in and do a copy edit. And, that person in particular happens to be very prolific. He happens to be a very prominent thought leader with millions of followers on LinkedIn, and has written hundreds upon hundreds of articles. So he's sort of the outlier. He's sort of the dream client or dream colleague. But I work with, like I said, the thought leaders across the entire gamut, and that's perfectly fine for me, just as long as I get their brilliant ideas out of their heads and onto paper or on the screen.
Great. Glenn, could you, in your career, roughly estimate, is it possible to roughly estimate what percent of the people who work with you are like the person who's got many followers and writes very well and has written numerous articles? What percent of the people who come to you fit that category versus the people who, at the other end of the spectrum, can't write very well? And of course, you're there to help them, but the writing is in some cases terrible. How would you segment, I guess, the people who come to you, and what are the rough percentages of people in each segment?
Right. Well, that's a good question. Maybe I should, go back and map it out a bit, but I can envision sort of a, two-dimensional, a four box matrix framework or of some sort. But what I would say is you did mention you made the point that maybe some of the thought leaders that I work with may not be very good writers or bad writers. Actually, there's a very large segment of people that I work with who are excellent writers, but don't have the time to write
Mhm.
for very good reason, because they're doing the work, they're serving the clients, they're doing the work that they're good at, and they actually happen to be outstanding writers. And I know that. But they just don't have time. So that's actually an interesting segment that I work with. So there I don't have the hard numbers, but I would say is overwhelmingly 80% of the people that thought leaders that I work with either don't have the time or the capability. And so it's a very small percentage that actually have the time and capability to sit down and hammer out a draft or a really fully formed outline independently. I say independently because, as you know, a lot of the work that we do, that I do, I work very often. I work one on one with one thought leader, and that actually I love working that way. I think that's very effective, and it yields a very good product. In many cases, however, I work with teams of people. So there may be one or two thought leaders who are driving the thinking, driving the writing, but actually they have teams of analysts and associates and others who are helping with the process of outlining, doing the research and writing the draft. And I'm accustomed to working, in that mode as well. So long story short, I think, just in sum, I would say 80% or so don't sit down and you have one person hammer out that draft, but either work with a team or require significant assistance from somebody else, either myself or somebody internally or somebody even externally. We work with external editors and idea developers, as you like to call them. Um, but yeah, I'll have to sit down and do the exercise to actually map out, the
Yeah.
percentages.
Do you see any unique challenges in working with an individual versus working with multiple people on an article or a white paper or maybe even a book?
That's a fantastic question, and I should try to write about this at some point. But I'll try to give you some ideas, some impressions based on my experience, and I'm sure you have your own experience working with either individuals or groups of people. I do both. So I would say, to some extent, I really enjoy, and I think it's more efficient and productive to work one on one with a thought leader, especially if they happen to be a good writer. That helps tremendously. Um, and also, what's more important than the writing is the distinctiveness, the freshness, the innovativeness of their ideas. So that's actually really paramount. If you think, right, for a thought leader, they should have new ideas that they're trying, new insights that they're trying to share. So that actually is number one. Writing is very important. As I just made that the argument for good writing, working one on one is really good. But the reality is, a lot of thought leaders do work, in teams of people, and it could be one or two thought leaders who are driving the thinking, working with teams of analysts and others who are helping. It's just something you get used to. It can be frustrating at times, obviously. You're trying to look for a decision or someone to sort of take charge, take the lead in thinking, driving the thinking. That's what I'm looking for. And if I'm not seeing it from the team, from someone on the team, things are not going to move forward. And that does happen. And so I say, look, this is not moving forward. These ideas are not very distinct from what you'll see out there. This has been published before. I've read 5 articles about this already. What are you saying, or what are we saying that is going to stand out, that's different, that you're going to be proud of showing to your clients? Sit down, let's try this again. If this outline is not working, I'm just going to be very honest. So I have to balance being balance the sensitivities and that thought leaders have with the desire. I know they want to stand out. I know they want to break through the noise. I know they want to attract the right attention from the right people, from their clients. And I believe the way to do that is through distinctive ideas and good writing and distinctive ideas is sort of a that magical combination. And if we can get that, achieve that, then I'm only helping them. So, and they know that.
Yeah.
But they're busy. They're serving clients. They're managing a lot of people, and we're trying to fit this in between, the spaces in between their meetings and their work. Um, but if it's valuable enough for them, if they value this, and most of them do, then we'll do whatever it takes, and we'll go through as many iterations as it takes, and as many discussions and drafts as it takes to arrive at a piece of writing, at a piece of thought leadership that they're going to feel proud sharing with their clients.
Yeah. Let's look at the question of, how to teach thought leaders or aspiring thought leaders to write better. Those who want to learn, right? Because in my experience, there are a lot of I've met a lot of people who, at the end of the day, you say, they're not listening. They don't really want. They think they write well enough, even if they write poorly. They're not interested in, at least in having me help them. But for those who want to learn, they do want to learn how to write better. Um, is it possible to take somebody who comes to you as a mediocre writer, or maybe even worse, and push work with that person to become a pretty good writer? Maybe not a professional writer who's ready to write, novels and have big publishers publish them, but to move from, say, mediocre to pretty darn good. Is that possible?
Right. Well, I think it's not easy, but I think it is possible. So I think the question you're asking is not, can you take a piece of writing that is not great and make it great, make it better, but rather, can you help someone, a thought leader, build this skill? It's obviously something that it's not a one-off thing. It's going to take a lot of practice and a lot of repetition, just doing this over and over again. But I think it is possible. And I have had the privilege to work with some thought leaders over the course of many, many years. And sometimes it doesn't take that long, but I can see there is a progression in their skills. And there's definitely some things that I can advise, or some advice that I can offer to you know help them, guide them along the way to first of all give them the confidence that it is possible to become a better writer, to improve their writing skills, and also just they should also be aware of it, and be aware, what are the criteria for good writing, for good thought leadership. How do I think about it so that, what's the checklist that they should have in their mind at all times as they read through a piece of writing that will help them evaluate their own writing to make it, to make it better in that next draft, that next. And I think the concept of iteration, doing things, taking it to the next level, to taking a draft and improving upon it and revising it, kicking the tires, getting feedback, getting input, is really critical. So the short answer is yes, it's possible to improve your writing. No, it's obviously not easy. It's not going to be overnight. Yes, it takes a long time. It can take some time to develop that skill. And yes, I believe it's worthwhile, especially if you're in it for the long run. If you're going to be doing this for many years, many decades, I think it's worth investing some time and energy, perhaps a little bit of money too, but it's really going to be time and energy to develop this skill. And there are a lot of great resources out there, more than ever, a lot of great books, a lot of great blog posts, a lot of free content on LinkedIn, and also podcasts that you can listen to, like your podcasts, for example, and others, that where you can learn the craft. And it's something that I have tried to develop myself. I'm always trying to refine and hone my own craft. I've been on a journey of learning how to become a better writer, probably for almost 2 decades now. I'm not stopping yet. And I always feel I can be better, and I can always improve. That said, I don't, I'm not paralyzed with fear, and I need to move forward and get the work done, and at least get the first draft out the door, and work on it and revise it and iterate it, and writing is really rewriting. So if you think about it that way, just get that first draft done, and then work on it, edit it, and you'll get to something better.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I look at I like some of my writing, and I look back at my old writing, and I think, "Oh my god, this is terrible. How did I write this?" And, and I think I've improved over time, but then you read people like, Malcolm Gladwell or Michael Lewis, and it's like I say, "Oh my god, I don't think I could ever write this well."
Right.
I need to get better, and so there's always somebody who writes, for me, much better, and there's so much improvement to be had. What kind of writing skills do you think, without going through all the skills that somebody who wants to learn how to write better needs to gain, skills they have to gain, but what kind of skills do you think are easier to teach and for somebody to learn, and what writing skills are harder to teach and to learn? Just a few maybe of each type. Easier to learn writing skills and harder to learn.
Right. I think of a try to develop a checklist, or if you can find a checklist, uh, and use that as your checklist when you're writing something. Anywhere from, it could be a short LinkedIn post, or a long, or an article, thought leadership essay, or a major publication, or eventually a book. But I would say, uh, if you have that checklist, that those are things that you can apply immediately and repeatedly to your writing. So there are a number of checklists out there. I've written a couple, but there are a couple of points that I could suggest thought leaders use as they think about their own writing, as they evaluate their own writing. And one of them is, there are a couple of them. One would be clarity. So clarity is paramount. Another one would be asking the question, what's new about your idea? What's distinctive about it? Another one would be, can you tell some sort of story, to bring your thinking to life, your ideas to life, and make them relatable? And then you could also ask yourself, is this something that I'm proud to share with my audience? Now, there are another, 15, 20, 30 uh, pieces of advice or criteria that I could suggest as you go through your writing. And I'm happy to share them, if you have extra time. But just clarity, is about, are your ideas clear to yourself? If they are, then you'll be able to communicate them clearly to others through your writing, right? So if you do the work up front in developing a detailed outline, which I know you're a very strong advocate of, for sitting down to write that first draft. I think when I talked to you last time, you suggested when you work with clients, you spend maybe 80% of the time just developing an incredibly detailed outline. I love that advice, because what that does is you're forcing yourself to get your ideas crisp and clear. Clarity also means removing or translating technical jargon, or industry jargon, which is something that we encounter all the time, which can make it difficult for the reader to understand your ideas, spelling out acronyms for the first time. And it also means supporting your arguments with evidence, facts, and examples. These are all things that I think you share in your book, competing on thought leadership, and something that you do with your clients.
When you think about the people that you've worked with, who you've worked with over the years, and those, especially those who have become, who when they started working with you, Glenn, were okay writers, and then they got very good, through your help, especially, but just the practice of writing, and maybe they did a lot of reading about good writing. If you look at those people, do you think that there was, anything about their attitudes, how they approached working with you, that was different than others, that people that you've worked with who just didn't progress as well as writers? Is there anything about attitudes and beliefs about becoming a better writer that may be a key to unlocking or learning these writing skills?
Yes, I think a couple of things. One is, I think they had to learn to trust two people. They had to learn to trust me with handling their ideas. So I had to learn, as an editor or idea developer, to win their trust, such that they're sharing a part of themselves. It's actually quite personal. Thought leaders, you know, on the outside they may look very, impressive and successful, but they're actually very often quite sensitive, especially when it comes to sharing, exposing their ideas to the world. But before they even get there, they have to expose their ideas to me or somebody else who, I'm trained to be a critic. I'm there to, of course, to be a productive, a constructive critic. I'm just trying to help them. Nonetheless, they have to learn to trust me. So I have to figure that out. They also have to learn to trust themselves and their own ideas, and feel like they have something that's worth sharing, sharing with their audience. So that's another deeper struggle that I can help them with, but they're going to have to work through that and learn that. I sound like I'm a psychologist. I'm not a psychologist, but and I don't pretend to be. But there's something about, learning to articulate your ideas on paper, in writing, that is very sort of gets to who a person is, and how they express themselves to the world. And it's a very delicate topic to some extent. And so the ones who are willing to sort of expose themselves, or to the world, expose their ideas to the world, it takes some courage, but it takes a lot of practice. Takes, some sort of falling down, making mistakes, but learning how to learn, make those mistakes, accept them, and learn from them. All of that is essential. So the ones who are willing to learn from their mistakes and try again and try again and keep doing it, those are the thought leaders who are going to get better at it. And I've seen that. Again, it's not overnight. It's not an overnight progression, but I've been lucky to work with some thought leaders who I've been able to work with for years. And you can see over a period of time that they can get better. They do get better. And the way they know that is through feedback from the market. So, when they see now, the feedback is very quick, on LinkedIn and elsewhere, on WeChat, wherever we're publishing an article or a video, they are, we can count how many people are viewing. We can even literally see who's reading and commenting and sharing their content. The feedback is quite immediate and very mostly transparent. Who's opening emails? So that feedback is very, very important, very helpful, and yeah. So
I was going to ask you, how important is that feedback from the standpoint of not just you, but more important in my mind is the person whose ideas are in the article and whose name is on the top, or the post or whatever. How important is it for them to get positive feedback that, people are actually listening or reading their ideas?
absolutely, it's very important. I think that positive feedback, that it provides positive reinforcement, is really important to them. So when the feedback comes in many different forms. It's not just in views or in likes or shares, although that's something you can see quite visibly. It's ultimately what they like to see is emails or calls from potential clients that lead to discussions, conversations in person. That's sort of and of course, the ultimate feedback is when it turns into a paying client, and that's what they're looking for. But uh, all of that put together is absolutely essential. And if they're not hearing that feedback, they're not seeing that kind of feedback, then yes, it can be discouraging. I'm sure. Maybe they think that it's not worth investing in developing, writing, publishing, and some people get discouraged quite easily from the lack of feedback. My suggestion is simply, try it. If it doesn't work, learn from your mistakes, try to do it differently, but try it again and don't give up. And it could take some time to generate an audience, to build an audience, to build a following, to build a reputation. These things are, as you know very well, are not overnight. Although there are some, in some cases, some things go viral, and you do have an overnight. Some books are, New York Times bestsellers right out of the gate, but uh, in general, it does take some time to build a reputation. So think about it going in for a new thought leader in particular. Know that this is going to take time. Know that you're going to have to try it and try it again, maybe dozens of times, maybe hundreds of times before you really establish yourself to the level of awareness and credibility that you're seeking. But it is doable. if you're willing to put in the time and try again.
Yeah. And, in terms of seeking feedback 20 years ago, I think LinkedIn was launched in 2003, if I'm remembering correctly. But these mechanisms for instant feedback, that is social media, did not exist, at least not in the form they are today. Feedback on one's writing. Well, did we sell this work or not? No, we didn't. We didn't get the deal. Or send an article to HBR, Harvard Business Review, or MIT Slow Management Review. Did they accept it? No. All right, more negative feedback. We published it in our latest McKinsey Quarterly. The print edition. I forget when the online edition came. Did anybody call us? No. It's like it was harder, right? It was harder to get feedback, but it's so much easier today posting articles, posting posts on LinkedIn, where we can all get immediate feedback. So do you advise the people who you work with to post things on LinkedIn, to post articles on LinkedIn, or to post, posts, just, not articles, I guess, posts on LinkedIn, to get that kind of feedback from some ideas that they've either written without your help or with your help? Do you tell them, get some feedback, post this thing?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I've been in this business long enough, like you have, to remember the times when we were waiting for the yes or the no from the op-ed page editor of whatever top tier publication. We were at their mercy, but now uh, we're not. So thought leaders are not. So absolutely, for something like LinkedIn, we could talk a little bit about that. I really started getting active myself on LinkedIn in 2014, and the advice that was given to me was just try to post, write an article once a week, which already was way more than I was doing at the time, which was zero.
Back in the fall of 2012, LinkedIn launched what it called its influencer program. It invited more than 300 people from numerous industries and others to write articles on LinkedIn. These people included Bill Gates, Virgin founder Richard Branson, ex-General Electric CEO Jack Welch, and Barack Obama. Glenn was invited as well, and he started posting articles in the spring of 2014. Then between 2015 and 2018, LinkedIn named him a top voice in 2 categories. The first of Glenn's many LinkedIn articles was called The 5 Attributes of a Successful Thought Leadership Professional. And in fact, in that article, which I hadn't read, Glenn linked to an interview that I had done at Bloom Group, my previous company, with Sarah Noble.
But I think today you should try to do something at least weekly, maybe twice a week. It could be a short piece, a short comment, but just share your ideas and be consistent about it. And then you can see it's going to take some time for it to gain some traction. You may hear crickets initially, get used to that. But there are ways to, I'm not saying game the system or game the algorithm, because I don't believe that's really what it's about. I believe it's about having distinctive ideas. And if you're good as a thought leader, if you are a thought leader, you have distinctive ideas and insights, and you start sharing them for free. Put them out there, and also interact with others, with other ideas. So it's not a one way. LinkedIn, for example, is not a one way platform. It's so-called social media. So you have to be social. You really should recognize other people's ideas, not just click like on them, but maybe leave a brief comment recognizing them, or commenting on their idea. So interact with other ideas and recognize others out there, so that people can see that, and you'll gain visibility in that way. But definitely put your ideas out there. Wait for the crickets to come, and then at some point, I think the crickets will turn into something I think worthwhile. And you don't have to have a huge following either, by the way. Just have the right following. Just attract the right followers and interact with them. Share your content freely. Really, a lot of it is sharing your content freely, and then do it consistently. Don't try it for a couple of weeks or a couple of months and go cold turkey. You really need to be out there for a while. Plan to be out there for at least a year or two before you ultimately give up. And never give up. I've never given up since I started 2014. in 2014. And the people that I work with, the thought leaders I work with, some of them have been on LinkedIn consistently for about that time, and some have done it incredibly well. And some just even started to become active a few months ago or a year ago, and they've seen tremendous success on the strength of their ideas, distinctive ideas shared in very short, pithy posts. Doesn't have to be long, doesn't have to be a 3,000 word essay for a major publication, does not even have to be a book. Uh, Graphics work well, one exhibit works well, something graphic, but it doesn't always have to, you don't always have to have something, a graphic to go with your content. Just distinctive ideas can go a long way. You can get quite a bit of traction that way.
So would you say the worst mistake in doing this, posting distinctive ideas regularly on LinkedIn, the worst mistake is to give up way too early?
That's definitely one of the worst mistakes. Another mistake is to not interact with others on the platform, just to think of it as a one-way platform. It's not. It's not a megaphone. It's a social media platform. So to be interactive. If somebody, by the way, if somebody likes your or comments on your article or your post, you should definitely recognize that in some way. Just click like, or maybe say thank you, and it's very possible that they'll come back for more and they'll follow you. So that is definitely a no-no, by just sort of publishing and just going silent and not interacting with the people who want to interact with your ideas and with your content.
Yeah. So you're saying engage with them. If they like it,
Absolutely.
they're showing, they're not doing it gratuitously. Engage with them. Further
That's
the
right.
discussion. Yeah. Okay. Last topic.
Sure.
Generative AI. Now we're in ChatGPT version 4, I guess, which I've been reading is even better than version 3, and I've been testing it on my own. And I'm both. Well, I'm not both. I'm fascinated. I'm intrigued. I'm worried, and I see it's not perfect. I see on topics I know, like who is Bob Buday? And, what has he done in thought leadership? I see things that are like, I don't know this person. I never got into business with this person. So I've seen version 3 be very wrong. Still, the pros that I have seen come out of it, from things I've written in and others have posted, the pros is remarkably good, even if the facts are not always right. The pros is impressive. But I want to hear your thoughts on this and where you think this is leading us, and especially its impact on writing for thought leaders.
Right. This is a great question. It's something that I've been grappling with. I've been thinking through and experimenting with it with ChatGPT over the past couple of months since it came out. And I agree with you. I think, first of all, I would just have to give kudos, congratulations to the team that created this, because it is an impressive application. It's very impressive what it does. And I have not tried ChatGPT 4, which is the latest iteration, which is more powerful. I knew it was coming, but indeed, those who have been using it say that it is more powerful than the previous version, which I'm using. It's a big question. I think initially I was concerned, but the more I look at it and the more I use it, the more I realize it's just going to be a very powerful and useful tool for us, for writers, and for thought leaders. So I think it's here to stay. It's not going away. It is powerful and only getting more powerful. So I think that the challenge is, how do we actually harness that power, harness the technology to make it really useful for us? My first forays, my first experiments with it were not yielding writing that I could use immediately, but I could see the potential for using it as, a helpful intern or assistant, automated intern or automated assistant, to try to get maybe breakthrough writer's block, which still afflicts all of us, including myself, by the way. Uh, a way to stimulate ideas, to pull out some content that out of the the internet that I would never have thought of. So I see it as a helpful assistant, and that could learn to become more and more useful. Um, and so, yeah, I think I was initially skeptical about it, given the results it was giving me, and still it's the version that I've been using has not been it's not ChatGPT 4, but I used it for an experiment to write a podcast script uh, for my wife in Chinese about the cello, aimed at 10-year-olds in Chinese, but using an English prompt, and it did it, and it created a very nice, very useful product. I'm not going to use it. My wife may or may not use it. I don't know if she'll actually use it. She'll probably throw it away and riff and do her own thing. Can it write a speech that I present to my firm, to my office, that draws on my decades of experience and unique experiences, at my firm? No. So I think there are certain things that it cannot do yet, and I'm glad it can't, because if it can, then I'm going to be replaceable. But right now, ChatGPT cannot write that speech that I gave to my office a couple of months ago, where I drew on some of the experiences that I've had here. I've been at this firm for over 2 decades. It's never been documented before. I've never written about it. I'm not supposed to write about it. Actually, some of these what I talked about shared is still confidential and really meant for my colleagues only. But at some point, if ChatGPT or some other application, generative AI application, can do that, can write that speech for me, then I'm going to have to do something else.
Yeah, I think I agree with what you say, and what I would also say is I think it's going to, and we really haven't gotten into this yet. I think it's going to I don't know if it's level the playing field or raise the playing field for thought leaders. In that, if a constraint for thought leaders was their inability to express something clearly, well, that's been taken away, right? So it's kind of, there are a lot of people are going to post a lot of things. They're going to be well written, unless they check on the accuracy of everything that they're feeding into Chat GPT. Some of their stuff's going to be wrong, but hopefully they're checking the accuracy and correcting mistakes that Chat GPT is introducing to into prose. But there are a lot of people who will sound very smart because Chat GPT is writing doing the writing largely. And I think that's then going to force the ideas that, like you put it, distinct ideas. That's going to raise the bar for truly distinctive ideas. As I understand generative AI and these large language models of AI, they're combing the web, looking for what's already been written, and using that and understanding how they use what. This is not really well understood, but using that to present something clear about whatever question you typed into these things. And so the way I look at it is, if it's simply capturing some of the best thinking, some of it inaccurate, and giving you a narrative about a question you asked, then Chat GPT is not, as I understand it, or generative AI is not at the level of, we're going to create whole new insight that no human has ever come up with. We're gonna gather the best insights or a bunch of good insights and put it to you in narrative form. Okay. Well, in my mind, that raises the level of insights, that distinctive insights people have to bring to market. And then so you look and you say, okay, well, what leads to distinctive insights? Well, doing primary research, really exploring best practices and comparing them against worst practices, including one's client work, really thinking harder about why did this set of companies do something much better than another set of companies who were focused on the same problem. So that then gets to research. It's going to raise the stakes in doing much better research and looking at best and worst practices and trying to divine the differences. And so ultimately, I see these generative AI tools as kind of forcing thought leaders to get much better at coming up with original insights based on studying whether they're their clients or other companies, what the best are doing differently than the worst on whatever the topic is. And that would suggest to me that anybody who's just riffing on something from a couple of client experiences is not likely to come up with any better insights than someone who's typing that question into ChatGPT and using that as the basis of his or her article. And that, in fact, the ChatGPT version may be better written and may have more insights because it's coming, more data points. And so I think if there's a moment when thought leaders really have to get on top of their game in coming up with original insights that have the evidence behind them, it's now that generative AI has brought us to this moment where ordinary ideas, even well written, lots of people will be publishing them.
No, that's right. I agree with what you just said, Bob. I think it is going to definitely push the bar much higher for thought leaders of all stripes, and the really good ones, the ones with distinctive ideas, distinctive insights, will, I think, be clearly at an advantage. And if they can invest in writing, getting those insights out in through good writing or through good videos or other formats, I think they will definitely create bigger distance between themselves and the rest of the pack of, say, average thought leaders, and those who rely on the technology and don't go take those extra steps or invest in developing those distinctive insights and turning them into strong writing, strong products, whether it be articles or books. They will be, they'll just be part of the just everybody else, and they may fall behind. Anyway, I think what you said makes a lot of sense. It's here to stay. Let's learn how to make use of it, but let's also realize that we're going to have to continue to invest in developing and writing about publishing distinctive insights.
Yeah. Well, Glenn, this has been great. It has been a real pleasure to talk to you about writing for thought leaders. And we're going to have to do this again, in 6 months or whatever, after we learn more about generative AI and how it's changing our field here. And I wouldn't be surprised to see over the next couple of years some big changes in how thought leadership content is produced and written and marketed and delivered because of this technology alone.
Absolutely. No, it's interesting times. But thank you, Bob, for inviting me on your program, and congratulations on the publication of your book. And I look forward to talking again soon sometime.
Thank you, Glenn. It's been a real pleasure. Everything Thought Leadership is a video and podcast series from Buday TLP. It's for thought leaders and thought leadership professionals, the people who help experts get recognized as thought leaders. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd love it if you left a like and if you shared the episode with your colleagues. You can find out more about Buday Thought Leadership Partners at budaytlp.com.